The courtroom was dead silent except for the hum of cameras broadcasting live to millions across the country. Judge Tanya Chutkan leaned forward from the bench, her gavel resting ominously close to her hand, her eyes sharp behind her glasses. "Senator Kennedy, answer the question directly," she said, her tone clipped, leaving no room for evasion. The tension was thick enough to choke on. John Neely Kennedy didn't flinch. Sitting at the witness table, his hands folded neatly over a stack of documents, he looked every bit the unshakable Southern senator he was known to be. The audience at home saw the contrast, a no-nonsense judge and a senator famous for his blunt one-liners, locked in a battle of wits. Before Kennedy could open his mouth, Chutkan cut in again, sharper this time, "We don't have all day, Senator." Gasps rippled through the gallery. This was the second interruption in under a minute, and Twitter was already lighting up with clips and memes. Hashtags like #Chutkan vs. Kennedy and #LetHimSpeak were trending before the hearing even hit the 5-minute mark. Kennedy adjusted his glasses and gave the faintest smile, the kind that sent a shiver through anyone who knew what usually followed. But just as he drew breath to answer, Chutkan interrupted a third time, her voice rising. "Senator, this is not a campaign rally." The room bristled, even the court stenographer glanced up, startled by the tone. Millions watching leaned forward, phones in hand, waiting. Kennedy's supporters knew what was coming. This wasn't just another hearing, this was a showdown, and Kennedy was about to deliver the kind of line that turns into headlines. Kennedy finally leaned toward the microphone, his calm drawl just beginning to roll out when, bam, Chutkan's gavel struck. "Senator, stay on topic," she barked, cutting him off for the 4th time. The gallery erupted in murmurs, and even a few reporters in the press row exchanged glances. This wasn't just firm moderation anymore, this was open confrontation. Kennedy didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He simply sat back, laced his fingers together, and let the silence hang for a few seconds. Viewers across the country held their breath, waiting to see if he'd explode or back down. Instead, Kennedy did what he always does, he let the tension build like a coiled spring. Twitter exploded. "She cut him off again," one user posted, racking up thousands of retweets in minutes. Another wrote, "Kennedy's about to drop the hammer, you can see it in his face." The live chat on multiple news streams was going wild, half cheering Chutkan for keeping control, half begging her to let him speak. Chutkan, clearly sensing she'd rattled him, or maybe rattled herself, leaned forward. "Senator, you are not here to grandstand. This committee demands straightforward answers." Her tone was icy, but her fingers drummed once on the bench, a telltale sign to anyone paying attention that she wasn't entirely in control. Kennedy finally adjusted the stack of documents in front of him, his movements slow, deliberate. He took off his glasses, cleaned them with a handkerchief, and replaced them before speaking again. "Judge," he began, his voice low and even, "I am answering the question. You just don't like where the answer is going." The audience gasped. The statement wasn't loud, but it cut like a knife. Chutkan's jaw tightened. The 5th interruption was coming, everyone could feel it, but so was Kennedy's counterpunch. Chutkan's gavel struck the desk a 5th time, louder than ever. "Senator, I will not tolerate this filibustering," she began, her voice sharp enough to slice through the tension. But before she could finish, Kennedy leaned forward, his hand flat on the table, his voice suddenly commanding, cutting through her words like thunder. "Judge, with all due respect," Kennedy said, his southern drawl carrying a weight that made every person in the room go still, "this is the United States Senate, not your courtroom. You've cut me off 4 times already, but the American people deserve to hear the truth. And I'm about to give it to them." The entire chamber went dead silent. Even the clicking of reporters' keyboards stopped mid-stroke. Chutkan froze, her gavel suspended in the air. Kennedy reached into the stack of documents in front of him and pulled out a folder marked, "Evidence." He flipped it open and began reading from an internal memo, one that detailed communications tying the court's decision directly to political pressure from high-level officials. Gasps rippled through the audience. Cameras zoomed in on Chutkan, whose face had gone pale. "This isn't speculation," Kennedy continued, his tone calm but cutting. "This is a paper trail, your paper trail, showing coordination that undermines every claim of impartiality this hearing was supposed to represent." Social media lit up like a wildfire. "Kennedy just ended her," one tweet read, getting tens of thousands of likes within minutes. Live stream chats were flooded with messages, "He's dropping receipts. She's done." Chutkan opened her mouth as if to respond but closed it again. For the first time all night, she had no words. The studio cameras caught every frame, her stunned expression, Kennedy's unwavering stare, the gallery's collective gasp. It was the moment everyone would be replaying for days, the exact second when Kennedy, with just a few words and one folder, turned the entire hearing on its head. For a long moment, the studio was frozen in silence, the weight of Kennedy's words hanging in the air like a thundercloud. Chutkan blinked once, twice, her gavel still raised as though she wasn't sure whether to strike it or drop it. The audience could hear the faint hum of the cameras and the scribble of one brave reporter's pen. Then, with a tight swallow, Chutkan lowered the gavel and forced a smile. "Senator," she said, her tone clipped, "your interpretation of these documents is your opinion." Kennedy didn't miss a beat. "It's not an opinion when your own emails say it, Judge," he shot back, his voice even but sharp as a scalpel. "That's not spin, that's not politics, that's proof." The audience broke into murmurs, some gasping audibly. The control room switched camera angles, zooming in on Kennedy's steady gaze, then cutting to Chutkan's strained expression. She set the gavel down carefully, as though trying not to betray how much her hands were shaking. Reporters in the back were already texting furiously, live tweeting every second. Headlines practically wrote themselves: "Kennedy shreds Chutkan live," "Senator drops bombshell evidence on national TV," "Studio stunned into silence." Chutkan tried again, her voice tighter this time. "This is highly irregular. These proceedings are exactly why I brought this evidence," Kennedy interrupted, leaning closer to the microphone, his presence filling the room. "If the American people can't trust what's happening here, then what's the point of having these hearings at all?" The room erupted. Half the audience applauded, despite the gavel pounding to restore order. Others simply stared, wide-eyed, realizing they were witnessing the kind of moment that would dominate every news cycle for the next week. Social media dashboards were already surging. Clips of Kennedy's "your emails say it" line hit TikTok within minutes, racking up tens of thousands of views before the hearing even adjourned. Comment sections were ablaze. Kennedy just nuked the entire room. Chutkan didn't see that coming. By the time the gavel finally brought quiet, the narrative had already left the building. Kennedy owned the moment, and everyone knew it. The gavel's echo had barely faded before Kennedy leaned back in his chair, calm but unyielding, the picture of a man who knew the tide had turned. "Judge, you can pound that gavel all night," he said, his southern drawl carrying across the chamber, "but you can't pound away the truth." That line hit like a spark in a dry forest. The audience erupted into cheers, some rising to their feet before Chutkan's aides could shush them. The control room cut to a split-screen shot: Kennedy, cool and collected, his papers neatly stacked before him, and Chutkan, visibly rattled, her lips pressed into a thin line as she struggled to regain authority. "Order! I said order," she barked, slamming the gavel again, but it only made the moment more dramatic. Every camera in the studio caught the contrast, Kennedy's steady gaze versus her barely contained frustration. Social media exploded in real time. Hashtags like #Kennedy exposes Chutkan and #Studio silence shot to the top of trending lists. Influencers clipped the moment within minutes, captions blazing across screens: "Kennedy just ended the debate with one sentence." Back in the chamber, Chutkan tried to pivot, flipping through her notes. "We are not here to conduct a trial by media," she snapped. Kennedy smiled faintly, as if he'd been waiting for that line. With all due respect, Judge, when justice hides behind closed doors, the people deserve to know what's really happening. That's why I'm here. That's why these documents are public now. Gasps rippled through the audience. The words public now landed like a thunderclap. Everyone realized Kennedy had just released the documents to the press. Reporters' phones buzzed as the files hit their inboxes. Headlines were already being drafted before the hearing even adjourned. Chutkan's jaw tightened. She knew the narrative had slipped from her grasp. Kennedy hadn't just won the exchange, he had turned the entire country into witnesses. Within minutes of Kennedy's dramatic declaration, news outlets went into overdrive. Push notifications lit up phones across America. Breaking: Kennedy drops documents live, Chutkan hearing erupts. Cable networks cut into regular programming, replaying the clip of Kennedy's one-liner on a loop. On social media, the reaction was instantaneous. TikTok edits with captions like, "Kennedy just nuked the courtroom," racked up millions of views in an hour. Twitter, X, threads dissected every frame, slowing down the moment Chutkan's composure cracked. Comment sections were ablaze. "Kennedy just did what no one else had the guts to do," wrote one user, while another added, "This is history in real time." Inside the courthouse, the fallout was immediate. Reporters swarmed the hallways, waving copies of the newly released documents, their pages covered in highlighted sections that seemed to implicate key figures. Chutkan's staff scrambled, some visibly shaken as they whispered into phones. By evening, every major news network hosted emergency panels. Analysts debated Kennedy's move. Was it a masterstroke of transparency or a political earthquake that could shake the justice system? Even networks traditionally hostile to him had to admit, this was a PR victory. Meanwhile, in Washington, senators and representatives were already being cornered by reporters on Capitol steps. "Have you seen what Kennedy released?" one journalist shouted. Some lawmakers dodged, others admitted they were deeply concerned about the revelations. Chutkan, however, stayed silent. Cameras caught her leaving the courthouse, jaw clenched, refusing to answer shouted questions. The image of her retreat, juxtaposed with Kennedy's calm confidence at the hearing, became the photo of the day. That night, Kennedy appeared briefly outside his Baton Rouge office, speaking to a sea of microphones. "The American people deserve the truth," he said simply. "Tonight, they have it." His words echoed across every channel, sealing the narrative. Kennedy had turned the tables. The next morning, America woke up to headlines that felt like political shockwaves. Kennedy's evidence exposes hidden communications. Major networks teased a bombshell segment coming that evening, promising to unpack every page of the documents Kennedy had unveiled. By the time the primetime broadcast began, the nation was glued to their screens. Kennedy appeared live, sitting at a plain wooden desk, a stack of papers neatly in front of him. The camera zoomed in as he spoke. "These aren't rumors," Kennedy said, his Louisiana drawl calm but razor-sharp. "These are internal memos, emails, and directives, and they show how decisions were influenced behind closed doors." He held up the first document, a scanned email chain with official letterheads. The screen flashed the key sentence in bold: "Delay any rulings until after November." Gasps echoed through living rooms across the country. "This isn't just politics as usual," Kennedy continued, tapping the page. "This is a plan to stall justice. The American people deserve to know who gave these orders, and why." He flipped to the next page, revealing a handwritten note initialed by a senior staffer. "This is what transparency looks like," Kennedy said. "Not speculation. Not spin. Facts." On social media, hashtags like #KennedyExposeTruth and #ChutkanFiles exploded. Clips of Kennedy calmly reading each document racked up millions of views within hours. Analysts on cable news scrambled to verify the documents, but so far, none disputed their authenticity. In the studio, Chutkan was reportedly furious. Leaked audio from inside her chambers caught her saying, "He's turning this into a circus." But the damage was done, the public had seen the receipts, and the pressure was mounting. That night, Kennedy closed his broadcast with a single line that instantly became iconic. "You can't hide the truth forever," and tonight, it came knocking. Crowds outside the courthouse the next day held signs reading, "We stand with Kennedy," and "Truth First." For the first time, the momentum had fully shifted, and even Chutkan's allies were publicly calling for answers. Within hours of Kennedy's live broadcast, Washington was in full crisis mode. Cable news networks ran split-screen coverage, Kennedy on one side, the damning documents on the other, while pundits debated what it all meant. "This is unprecedented," said one legal analyst on CNN. "If these documents are authentic, they raise serious questions about judicial impartiality." Outside the courthouse, a crowd swelled to hundreds, then thousands. Some waved American flags, others held up signs with bold black letters, "Let justice be just." Reporters shoved microphones toward anyone willing to speak, and nearly every clip they captured was a fiery endorsement of Kennedy's stand. Inside her chambers, Judge Tanya Chutkan was seething. According to a staffer who later leaked details to the press, Chutkan slammed a binder shut and said through clenched teeth, "He's trying to put this court on trial." But the pressure was mounting from every direction. Congressional leaders on both sides of the aisle called for an investigation into the allegations raised by Kennedy's evidence. Meanwhile, Kennedy doubled down. He appeared on Fox, CNN, and even late-night programs, never raising his voice, simply repeating, "The truth isn't partisan, it's public property." His calm, measured tone made him appear even more credible compared to the scattered responses from Chutkan's defenders. On social media, the narrative was spinning out of control. Memes flooded Twitter and TikTok showing Kennedy holding the documents with captions like, "Game over." A viral clip of Kennedy saying, "You can't hide the truth forever," hit 20 million views in under 24 hours. Political pressure intensified as senators began drafting a bipartisan letter demanding a full review of Chutkan's recent rulings. Even usually quiet moderates spoke out, calling the revelations deeply troubling. By nightfall, major outlets were using words like scandal, crisis, and bombshell. The story wasn't just about Kennedy anymore, it had become a referendum on the integrity of the system itself. And as the cameras followed him leaving a press conference, Kennedy gave a slight smile, as if to say, this fight was only just beginning. The nation was glued to their screens as Kennedy and Judge Tanya Chutkan faced off in a primetime live interview moderated by one of the most respected anchors on television. The studio lights glared, the air thick with anticipation. Viewers at home could feel the tension before a single word was spoken. "Senator Kennedy, Judge Chutkan," the anchor began, "Tonight America expects answers." Kennedy nodded politely, his signature stack of documents on the desk in front of him. Chutkan sat stiffly, her jaw tight, her hands clasped a little too hard. The first question was simple, did the documents prove bias? Kennedy began, his voice calm and deliberate. "These aren't rumors. These are signed communications, internal memos." Chutkan cut in sharply, "Those so-called memos are taken out of context." Kennedy didn't flinch. "Judge, context is exactly why." She interrupted again, louder this time. "This is nothing more than a political stunt meant to intimidate the judiciary." The anchor raised a hand, trying to regain order, but Kennedy waited, his expression unreadable. "May I finish?" he asked softly. Chutkan smirked and cut him off a third time, calling the allegations dangerous to democracy. The audience murmured, sensing her agitation. Kennedy remained poised, hands folded, eyes locked on hers. On the fourth interruption, the anchor visibly winced. "Judge Chutkan, let him respond." Kennedy leaned forward, his voice dropping to a quiet, razor-sharp register. "Judge, you've had 4 chances to shout over me. Here's my turn, and I'll use only 7 words. If the truth hurts, fix the truth." The studio went dead silent. Even Chutkan froze, her rebuttal dying on her lips. The audience gasped, then erupted into applause that shook the set. The clip was instantly clipped and shared online, racking up millions of views within hours under the hashtag #FixTheTruth. That night, every major network replayed the moment, calling it the quote heard around the country. Kennedy's calm but cutting line didn't just win the exchange, it shifted the entire narrative. By morning, the clip had gone viral. News anchors played it on repeat, panelists argued over it, and social media turned Kennedy's 7 words into the most shared soundbite of the year. Hashtags like #FixTheTruth and #Kennedy vs. Chutkan trended globally, dominating every platform. Cable news networks ran split screens, Chutkan's stunned face on one side, Kennedy leaning forward with his quiet, lethal delivery on the other. This was a moment, one commentator said. Not just political theater, a cultural turning point. Editorial pages lit up. The Washington Examiner called it a masterclass in restraint and precision. Even more liberal outlets admitted Kennedy had landed a blow that would be remembered. A major late-night host joked, Judge Chutkan got fact-checked in real time, by a senator with receipts. In Baton Rouge, crowds gathered outside Kennedy's office, cheering and waving signs reading Truth Matters and Kennedy 2028. The senator addressed them briefly, smiling but measured. This isn't about winning a debate, he said. It's about making sure the truth can speak, even when someone tries to shout it down. Meanwhile, Chutkan's team scrambled to contain the fallout. Anonymous leaks to the press claimed she had been set up, but the public wasn't buying it. Memes flooded the internet, turning her repeated interruptions into GIF loops captioned with, "When you lose the argument but keep talking." Political strategists were already calling it a defining moment for Kennedy's national profile. Donors poured money into his PAC within 24 hours, breaking fundraising records. Analysts compared the viral moment to past iconic debate lines that shifted careers, and hinted that Kennedy might now have a path to the White House if he wanted it. By the weekend, late-night comedy shows, morning talk panels, and podcasts all had one consensus: whatever else happened, Kennedy had owned the moment. His line wasn't just a retort, it had become a rallying cry. And there you have it, folks. Senator Kennedy didn't just defend himself, he reminded America that the truth doesn't need to shout to be heard. Judge Chutkan tried to cut him off again and again, but his final words turned the entire studio silent and turned millions of viewers into believers overnight. This wasn't just a win for Kennedy, it was a moment that will be replayed, remembered, and talked about for years to come.